comes a moment in life when you stop chasing closure from people who were never capable of giving it. You see, most people expect a reaction. They expect an argument, a long message, a dramatic ending, because that's the cycle they've always known. Hurt, react, repeat. And when you don't respond, when you go quiet, it confuses them. It disarms them. It ends the game they were playing because they realize you've stepped off the field. Silence is often misunderstood. In a world that rewards loud opinions, constant commentary, and instant reactions, silence can seem like indifference, avoidance, or even weakness. But the truth is, silence, when chosen intentionally, is none of those things. It's mastery. It's a sign of someone who has learned to regulate their emotions rather than be ruled by them. It's the quiet confidence of a person who no longer feels the need to prove, explain, or defend. We're conditioned to believe that strength is about speaking up, taking space, being heard. And while there is undeniable power in voice, there's an even greater strength in knowing when not to use it. Silence is the moment after the storm when the sky clears. Not because the chaos didn't matter, but because you've decided not to fuel it further. It's what happens when you realize that not every battle is worth fighting, and not every insult needs a response. Mastery of emotion isn't about bottling up how you feel. It's about knowing where to place your energy. It's the ability to sit with discomfort without reacting impulsively. It's the maturity to let others say what they need to say without needing to match their tone, defend your stance, or change their opinion. Because when you've done the inner work, you no longer need to be validated externally. Think about it. How often do people react not because they're truly hurt, but because their ego is bruised? How often do we speak just to fill the space, to appear in control, to feel heard, even if what we say does nothing to solve the problem? Emotional mastery is the opposite of that. It's the stillness that comes from self-awareness, the kind that says, I know who I am, and I don't need to engage just to prove it. When someone tries to provoke you, they're often trying to regain control. They want a reaction. They want to pull you back into a dynamic that feeds their insecurity or ego. But silence breaks that cycle. It leaves them with their own words echoing back at them. And in that uncomfortable quiet, they're forced to confront themselves, often for the first time. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects their behavior without giving them the distraction of your response. This kind of restraint is not passive. It takes an incredible amount of strength to hold back when every part of you wants to speak. It takes clarity to know that engaging won't change the outcome, but walking away might change you. It means choosing growth over drama, peace over pride, and purpose over noise. It's also a choice rooted in wisdom. When you choose silence, you're not saying that what happened didn't affect you. You're saying that you respect yourself too much to keep bleeding for it. You're not giving up the right to speak. You're exercising the wisdom to know when not to. There's a deep power in simply being unbothered. Not detached in a cold, numb way, but calm because you've outgrown the chaos. You've learned that control isn't about dominating a situation, it's about mastering yourself within it. And once you've done that, silence becomes your superpower. The world will continue to make noise, people will continue to provoke, misunderstand, misjudge, and manipulate. But when you've reached a place of emotional mastery, their noise won't shake your peace, because real power isn't in how loud you are, it's in how quietly you walk away when staying no longer serves you. That's not weakness, that's strength in its highest form. There's a quiet power in choosing not to respond. In a world that thrives on reaction, on clapping back, arguing, defending, and proving a point, choosing silence can feel like going against the grain, but the truth is sometimes the loudest, most profound response is no response at all. It's not an act of passivity, it's an act of discipline, of strength, of knowing your value and refusing to hand your peace over to anyone who tries to provoke you. People often expect a reaction. That's what they're aiming for. They say something hurtful, manipulative, or inflammatory, and they wait. They want the emotional outburst. They want you to spiral, to explain, to prove them wrong. Because if they can pull you into that space, into that back and forth, they win a kind of control. They get your energy, they get access to your emotions, and most of all, they get to see that they still matter enough to disturb your peace. But when you don't respond, something shifts. The dynamic changes. Silence speaks louder than any argument could. It says, I'm not playing this game anymore. It says, your words don't reach me like they used to. It's a boundary, firm, unspoken, and impossible to ignore. And that silence, that unbothered stillness, it's deafening to the one who expected noise. Now, response is not about being passive-aggressive. It's not about suppressing your emotions or pretending something didn't hurt. It's about making a conscious decision to rise above it, to not give someone else the power to dictate your emotional state. There's a deep strength in being able to sit in the storm and not be moved by it. That's not avoidance, that's mastery. And here's the irony. When you don't respond, you say everything. You say, I've moved on. You say, this conversation no longer serves me. You say, my peace is worth more than being right. You don't need to have the last word when you've already made the final decision. Walking away, disengaging, letting go, that's where true authority lies. It's tempting to believe that silence means losing, that not speaking up means letting them win. But that's the ego talking. Winning doesn't come from reacting, it comes from choosing what deserves your energy. Not everything does. Not everyone earns your time, your words, or your emotional investment. Some things are beneath the level you've grown to. Some conversations are traps, not dialogue, and responding to them is like stepping backwards into a version of yourself you've already outgrown. There's also something freeing about no response. You give yourself the gift of detachment. You don't have to carry the weight of someone else's chaos. You don't have to replay the argument in your mind, overanalyzing what you said or how they'll twist it. You simply move forward, untethered, unburdened, and grounded in your truth. Let others wonder why you didn't respond. Let them sit with their words. Let them face the silence. Because that silence holds power. It forces reflection. It interrupts patterns. And most of all, it protects your peace. At the end of the day, you don't owe anyone access to your mind or your emotions. You don't have to show up to every conflict you're invited to. There is dignity in walking away. There is wisdom in choosing silence. And there is unmatched strength in knowing that sometimes the loudest and clearest message you can send is none at all. We're taught that closure comes through words, a conversation, an apology, a moment of mutual understanding that wraps everything up neatly. But real life doesn't often work that way. The truth is, closure doesn't always come from someone else. Sometimes it comes from within. Sometimes it's not a conversation, it's a decision. A quiet, private decision that says, I've had enough, or this chapter is over, even if it didn't end the way I wanted. We wait for people to give us clarity. We wait for the phone call, the explanation, the validation. We hold on to pain because we're convinced that the only way to let go is if someone else gives us permission. But what if that moment never comes? What if the person who hurt you isn't capable of honesty? What if they're too proud, too unaware, or too broken to give you the answers you deserve? Do you stay stuck forever, waiting? That's where the shift happens. That's where the decision comes in. You realize that closure isn't a favor someone else grants you. It's a gift you give yourself. It's the moment you stop chasing the why, the how, and the what if. It's when you look at the situation and say, even without resolution, I choose to move forward. That choice doesn't require permission. It doesn't need their agreement. It only needs your willingness to stop bleeding over what cut you. Closure as a decision is powerful. It reclaims your agency. It says, you don't get to keep me stuck just because you never finished the story. Because the truth is, some people don't care enough to offer closure. Some aren't self-aware enough to even realize the damage they've done. And some knew exactly what they were doing and just didn't care. Waiting for them to heal what they broke is like handing your peace to someone who has no intention of protecting it. There's strength in deciding that you don't need their apology to heal. There's strength in saying, I forgive you, even if you never ask for it. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean what they did was okay. It means you refuse to let their choices live rent-free in your mind any longer. You stop caring what was never yours to carry. You stop needing a dialogue to validate your pain. Sometimes you won't get the apology. You won't get the explanation. The phone won't ring. The truth won't surface. And even if it did, it might not change anything. And that's why closure has to be internal. It has to come from your decision to take control of your own narrative. You get to choose when the story ends. Not them. And yes, it's hard. It's hard to let go without the final word. It's hard to walk away without knowing why they changed, why they left, or why they treated you the way they did. But holding on won't fix it. Holding on only delays your healing. The real freedom comes when you release the need to understand everything. When you stop needing their version of the story and trust your own. Closure, when chosen, is a form of emotional maturity. It's a deep breath that says, this chapter hurt, but it taught me. It's knowing that you can still find peace without getting all the pieces. Because sometimes, peace isn't found in a conversation. It's found in the quiet moment you decide to stop looking back. You don't need their words. You need your decision. And that decision, that's closure. There comes a point in your growth where you simply stop explaining yourself. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. You stop justifying your decisions, your boundaries, your healing, or your peace. You begin to understand that those who truly see you won't need constant explanations, and those who constantly demand them are often more interested in control than understanding. When you're younger or still finding your footing, it's normal to want people to understand you. You want to be liked. You want your choices to make sense to others. You want approval, or at least acceptance. So you over-explain. You try to soften your no. You try to justify your distance. You apologize for putting yourself first, for growing, for evolving. But eventually, you realize something. No amount of explaining will satisfy people who are committed to misunderstanding you. That's the shift. That's when real evolution begins. You start to outgrow the need for constant validation. You begin to see that your energy is better spent on becoming, not convincing. You stop trying to make people comfortable with your progress, because growth makes people uncomfortable, especially those who benefited from your lack of boundaries, your people-pleasing, or your silence. And when they push back, they'll ask for explanations. They'll demand a reason. They'll want to know what changed. But the truth is, you don't owe everyone an explanation for your growth. Sometimes things change because they were supposed to. Sometimes you changed because staying the same started to hurt. Sometimes you walk away from people, places, or roles that no longer fit, not because you're cold, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that once fit inside that space. Every time you stop explaining, you reclaim a part of your energy. You pull it back from the exhausting effort of trying to be understood by everyone. And the more you do that, the more you evolve. You begin to move in silence, not out of secrecy, but out of confidence. Your decisions are no longer up for debate. Your peace is no longer on trial. You start to live by a deeper truth. The right people don't need you to explain yourself. They feel your intention. They respect your boundaries. They support your growth, even if it takes you away from what's familiar. And the ones who don't, they'll fall away, not because you pushed them, but because you no longer shrink yourself to make them stay. This isn't about being dismissive or emotionally closed off. It's about being wise with your energy. It's about realizing that growth is a personal journey, not a group project. Not everyone will come with you, and not everyone is meant to understand every step of the path. That doesn't make them wrong. It just means their chapter in your story may be over. You don't evolve when you're constantly explaining your every move. You evolve when you start listening to your own inner guidance more than you listen to outside noise. You evolve when you stop defending your healing, your joy, your solitude, your boundaries, and simply start living them. So let go of the need to be understood by everyone. Let go of the pressure to explain your every shift. Let people think what they want to think. Let them create their own narratives if they must. What matters most is that you are living in alignment with who you are becoming, because the moment you stop explaining is the moment you start becoming. And that evolution, it speaks for itself. Not everyone deserves access to your words. It's a hard truth, especially for those who feel deeply, who want to be understood, and who believe in giving others the benefit of the doubt. But the reality is, your words carry weight. They hold your truth, your time, your energy, and your presence. And giving that away to people who misuse it isn't kindness, it's self-betrayal. We live in a culture that pushes constant communication. Talk it out, speak your mind, be the bigger person. But sometimes, silence is the wiser choice. Because words are sacred. They are not just sound, they're energy, they are intention. They are a reflection of your values, your self-worth, and your emotional labor. When you constantly share them with people who don't listen, don't care, or only twist them to serve their ego, you're pouring from an empty cup. There are people who don't want your truth, they want control. They don't seek to understand, they seek to win. They'll argue just to wear you down, not to connect. They'll interrupt your vulnerability with defensiveness. They'll dismiss your feelings and then demand that you explain yourself again and again and again. These are not misunderstandings, these are patterns. And here's the thing, once you recognize the pattern, continuing to engage becomes a choice. You're not obligated to keep showing up in conversations that only drain you. You're not required to keep explaining your boundaries to someone who repeatedly crosses them. You don't owe your voice to every person who demands it. Some people aren't ready to hear you, and some never will be. That's not your fault, and it's not your job to fix. Part of growing is realizing that your words are not for everyone. They are for those who listen with respect, not reaction. For those who create space, not conflict. For those who honor your presence, not those who take it for granted. The more you grow, the more you realize that protecting your peace isn't about shutting others out, it's about keeping your energy sacred. And that starts with being intentional about who gets your words. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means recognizing when a conversation has reached its limit. When a person has shown you repeatedly that they don't have the capacity to meet you where you are, when your voice is being treated like noise, not like truth, that's when you stop talking. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. It can be uncomfortable at first, especially if you're someone who's used to explaining, resolving, or making peace. But silence isn't the absence of care. It's the presence of a boundary. It's you saying, I value myself enough to stop giving you parts of me you don't appreciate. It's not cutting someone off. It's closing a door they kept slamming in your face. And in that quiet, you'll find clarity. You'll find that not everyone is meant to hear your story, and that's okay. The right people won't need you to exhaust yourself to be understood. The right people will hear you, even in your quietest moments. So be careful with your words. Treat them like the gift they are. Give them to those who earn them through respect, presence, and reciprocity. And to those who don't, Let your silence speak the boundary your voice no longer needs to explain. Because some people simply don't deserve access to you, and that's not cruel. That's self-care. Silence is often mistaken for the end of something, the end of relationship, the end of communication, the end of caring. But in reality, silence is not the end, it's the beginning. It's the beginning of self-respect, of reclaiming your peace, of no longer negotiating your worth in spaces that can't recognize it. Silence is not what happens when you give up. Silence is what happens when you've finally had enough. When you stop trying to prove, persuade, or perform. When you realize that your voice is valuable and not everyone deserves access to it. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly having to explain yourself, from having to defend your boundaries, justify your choices, or beg to be heard by people who aren't really listening. You start to realize that speaking louder doesn't make them understand you better. It just drains you faster. And that's when silence becomes a decision, a powerful, intentional decision to choose yourself over the endless noise. Silence says, I've tried. It says, I cared enough to speak before, but now I care enough about myself to stop. It's not cold or heartless. It's not avoidance or emotional immaturity. In fact, silence often comes after a long journey of giving someone chance after chance to meet you with the same respect and effort you offered. And when they don't, silence becomes the most honest response you can give. When you choose silence, you're not walking away from love, empathy, or compassion. You're walking away from chaos, from disrespect, from conversations that go in circles and never lead to growth. Silence is how you protect your energy when you've been over-explaining yourself to people who never really wanted to understand you, only to control or invalidate you. It's the moment you stop participating in dynamics that shrink you. And it's not just about walking away from others, it's also about walking back to yourself. Because in that silence, something beautiful begins to happen. You start to hear your own voice again, the one that got drowned out in the noise of other people's expectations. You start to feel grounded in your own truth, no longer needing it to be accepted or echoed by others. You begin to reconnect with your own values, your own standards, and your own peace. That's what makes silence the beginning of self-respect. It's the place where you stop outsourcing your worth, where you stop explaining your heart to people who treat your vulnerability like weakness, where you realize that love isn't supposed to be proven, it's supposed to be felt. And when it isn't, you don't scream louder, you simply walk away with dignity. Self-respect isn't loud, it doesn't argue, it doesn't beg, it doesn't chase. Self-respect is quiet and steady. It's a soft but unshakable knowing that your value is not dependent on someone else's ability to recognize it. And the moment you truly believe that, silence becomes easy. Not bitter, not forced, just natural, because you no longer feel the need to explain your worth to anyone who couldn't see it the first time. So no, silence isn't the end, it's the beginning of something deeper. It's the beginning of inner peace, of emotional maturity, of freedom from codependent patterns and toxic dynamics. It's the sound of you coming home to yourself.